AEW Revolution 2025 is here, the first AEW pay-per-view of the year, and it really felt like an AEW pay-per-view of old. A lot of the criticisms that existed and sort of plagued the company in 2024 were shed in this pay-per-view, but there were still some major structural flaws. This pay-per-view really functioned as an encapsulation of AEW in 2025 thus far, where there were so many incredible story beats, so many great matches, so many characters that just clicked with the audience, but then also long extended periods of just nothingness that completely killed the audience and ruined the entire vibe of the show. But we're going to go through it. I'm not going to break down each match in terms of what happened, but I am going to give my overall thoughts on the action, the storylines, directions going forward, as well as a rating for each match on a scale of 0 to 5 stars. If you guys like the video, please consider subscribing, leaving a comment, leaving a like, as it really does help a new channel like mine to grow. But with all of that being said, let's go ahead and get into it with our first match. To open the show, we had Hangman Page taking on MJF, and I thought this was a fantastic match. And for a match to be called fantastic or to be called great, in my opinion, it needs to have some level of uniqueness to separate it from all the other matches that happen in the pro wrestling sphere that are just good. And this match was definitely unique. One thing that I thought was interesting about this that I haven't really seen too much before is they essentially had two matches within the span of one match. They had their first match in the space of 10 minutes, where they start out with just a hockey fight. They brawl on the outside for a little bit, get into some of their bigger, signature spots, and then start hitting the finishing moves, or start teasing them up anyway. Hangman going for the buckshot several times within the 8 to 10 minute region. But then after that, they just started this new brutal brawling scope of a match where Adam Page hit the most disgusting angel wings you've ever seen in your life. MJF hit a tombstone on a chair. There was just like, right when it was hitting its crescendo in what should have been the third act around the 10-minute mark, it ramped up the violence even more and added this new layer onto the match that really dragged you into it. And by the end, I was fully enveloped into this match. I thought it was such a unique structure, taking the normal sort of framework of a match and then elevating it at the end to show that these guys are better than what you would normally see on an episode of Dynamite or an episode of a competitor show. I thought it was a beautiful structure for a match. There were some things that were detracting from it for me. I feel like there were some weird things, like MJF's Fujiwara armbar submission sequence was a little bit too long. They would be going through these sequences, and then one person would pause to interact with the crowd at a really weird time. And MJF screaming at the crowd, "Why not me?" It was too melodramatic and too out of place. There was a lot of these little idiosyncrasies over the course of the match, which I didn't love. And unfortunately, they always came at just the wrong time. Right as the action was heating up, or I was getting really invested in a sequence, a little thing reared its head to go, "Oh, why are we doing this now? Why can't you just stay in the pocket and keep the action rolling?" There was always stuff to break it up, and it made the match a little bit choppy at points for me. But though they weren't really something that would take you out of the match completely, because these guys are such great workers that the next time they move on to something else, they're able to just drag you back into whatever they were doing. So you're distracted saying, I wish they hadn't done that. And then 15 seconds later, you forgot that thing even happened. If I hadn't written notes for this show, I probably wouldn't remember any of those things happened either, because the action was truly great. They told a great story. And unlike the closer of the show, unlike the main event, which we'll talk about in length probably at the end of this video, this felt like a return to why people love AEW, to AEW originals, stars that this company made, characters that are elevated by this company, going at it in a 20-minute match, just having a phenomenal match, some out of this world action mixed with truly, truly great storytelling that is sort of enveloped and interwoven in not only the threads of these characters, but also what this company is. Like Hangman Page and MJF are such integral parts of this company, and Hangman going back to his old babyface role, sort of returning to it after a long time being this badass heel, and MJF being jealous of that, jealous that the fans love him more than they do MJF. And that's like a 5 year story, two separate 5 year stories coalescing in this match. And it wasn't the crescendo of either story by any means, but it was just more steps on the way. And it, what is great about AEW when it's functioning on all cylinders is that every match and every storyline, even if it is not the main thing that this wrestler is going to be doing in their character arc in AEW, it is a little step on the journey to continue getting fans invested. And that's what this match was. I think that more than loving the action, I loved the match because of the vibes and the feeling that it gave me. And it really got this pay per view off to a hot start. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next, for the TBS title, Mercedes Moné was defending against Momo Watanabe. And this match started off a little bit slow for me, a little bit wonky. A lot of times when you have these Japanese Joshi wrestlers like from Stardom or Shimmer or TJPW, it just they don't mesh well a lot of times with North American or UK wrestlers. It's just stylistically they're so different where the Japanese Joshi wrestlers focus more on striking and slow build stories, whereas the North American wrestlers focus on these big bombastic moves to really pull the audience in. And I do feel like that plagued the first couple minutes of this match. And the first couple minutes of a match are really when you are pulling the audience into it and really when you are trying to establish how invested should we be in this bout. And the first couple minutes of this match told you you shouldn't be very invested. But after about 5 minutes, oh my God, what a change in dynamics, because this match was whatever 15 minutes long, 18, maybe 18, 20 minutes long, and from like the 5 minute mark to the end it was just nonstop great action, really great thrills throughout. And it seemed like they were both working really hard to make this match important because they weren't given any story prior to this. Obviously Momo won the was it like the Women's World Cup or something like that? It was at Wrestle Dynasty this year on the kickoff show. She beat Athena and Persephone and who else? One other person. It was a four-way match. I don't remember who the other person was. But like it wasn't given a high profile, wasn't given a great deal of importance. And these two weren't really shown together on TV that much. It had like a 3 or 4 week build. Like they interacted at Grand Slam, and then other than that, it was just backstage segments and vignettes. So the audience never really connected with this match. But these two women worked so unimaginably hard to pull the audience into what they were doing. And part of it was that they were really going for each other. They were really hitting each other hard. Momo was beating the hell out of Mercedes, and Mercedes was really, really giving it back to her. It seemed like Momo was, I don't know. I've heard some takes saying like, why was Momo going so hard? Why was she laying it in so much? I think that's just how they do it in Stardom. Like if you've ever watched a Stardom match, they just beat the hell out of each other a lot of the time. So I feel like she was just doing that here to display the style that she normally wrestles in. I didn't think particularly she was going harder than I've seen her go in any of her previous matches with Mayu Iwatani or anyone else. I think it was just a normal Momo Watanabe performance. But Mercedes really leveled up to her in this match. And one thing I'd like to highlight is their selling. I thought both women had their selling shoes on for this match. They were making each other look incredible. The way that Momo would just fold after a Meteora or a backstabber from Mercedes, or when Momo was throwing out kicks and Mercedes would just recoil and throw these facials out like I'm in agony. It was just a beautiful way to pull the audience into the match. And I got really into the match after probably the first 5 minutes. It took the audience a little bit longer, but they did get into it. The wrestlers, through sheer force of will, forced them to get into it. And they couldn't luxuriate in the crowd heat like MJF and Hangman could because they're such established and respected characters within the space and given so much time and attention by the bookers. This match, really, the crowd didn't have that. So the only way you can pull them in is to have a fantastic match. And they really had a fantastic match here. I respected this match so much. I would say I respected it more than I actually loved it. I probably am giving it a higher rating than it is worth because I respected the craft and how they were able to pull the audience into the match. And Mercedes is really on a hot streak lately with some of her stuff with Willow, her last two matches with Statlander, and now this match. She is really, really consistently showing up and having these great pay-per-view matches every time she is given the opportunity. And I feel like this is another classic great match in Mercedes TBS run. I gave it the exact same ratings I did the last match, 4.5 out of 5 stars. And next, we had a handicap match. It was Ricochet taking on the team of Swerve Strickland and Leslie Jones in the audience. I don't know what AEW was on this match, but they were showing a lot of Leslie Jones. Some people probably will hate it. I didn't mind it. I thought it was fun. I liked it. Really, Swerve Strickland versus Ricochet in a number one contenders match. I thought this match was phenomenal. I thought that they did such a great job about blending hard hitting offense with high flying athleticism because really both of these wrestlers, Swerve and Ricochet, succeed most when they are able to do these high flying, death defying stunts that really make the audience get up and say, wow. But they also need to incorporate extra brutality and extra physicality into this match because the story leading up to it required that of the payoff. And they married those two concepts together so beautifully. I thought it was a tricky melody to strike, but they did it absolutely beautifully. Some stuff wasn't for me, like a reverse Rana on the apron, but some stuff definitely was, like a Gringo Killer on the table, which was, yes, please, absolutely awesome. I thought the Prince Nana melodrama in this match was odd. It was just sort of there. Like, I didn't like it. It didn't add anything to the match, but I didn't dislike it. I don't think it detracted from the match either. It was just sort of there in another story beat. I do sort of wish they only focused on Swerve versus Ricochet and just stuck with the action the whole time, but it didn't really affect my star rating at all because I was just like, oh, I guess that happened, and now we're back to some phenomenal wrestling. It didn't really takeaway. At some points, it did teeter on becoming distracting, but it never really stepped over that line. Overall, I feel like this accomplished a lot of goals. It was a phenomenal match to start with, a match that was really able to balance those ideas of let's put on a great match while also really telling a really violent story. Put those together beautifully. Also did a really good job of setting both men's characters going forward. Ricochet now on his own as a heel in the AEW roster, moving away from his Swerve Strickland program for the first time, and Swerve moving towards Jon Moxley for the AEW World Championship. I feel like there is not a match that could have better set both men up for those journeys than this one. I feel like I'm on a 4-5 kick because that's what I'm giving this match to, 4.5 out of 5 stars. First three matches on the show all get 4.5 out of 5, and that's not me being generous or me just wanting the show to succeed for some reason. It is just an excellent, hot start to this show. But with the next two matches, we're definitely going to bring it down a little bit. Next, for the Continental Championship, Kazuchika Okada was defending against Brody King. And I've come to realize something about Brody King. I sort of had this little revelation in this match. I think Brody King's a great wrestler, but that doesn't always mean he has great matches. I've sort of come to realize Brody King has really, really great matches when he's facing two kinds of people. Either smaller guys who he can really dominate up to that person making a hot comeback, or the sort of world class talent like a Will Ospreay or a Swerve Strickland who can really meld their styles with anyone. Those sort of five-tool players who can do high flying, who can do brawling, who can do technical stuff, or who can do the hard-hitting offense that is associated with a Brody King match. And when you put one of those two kinds of competitors in the ring with Brody, you get greatness. When you put anyone else in the ring with Brody, you get goodness, I guess would be the best way to describe it. And this match was good, but not great. Okada used to be one of those guys. He used to be one of those guys who could adapt his style to anyone he was in the ring with. You go back and you look at his New Japan matches with Ishii, with Michael Elgin. He had a couple great matches with Jonah before he went back to WWE as Bronson Reed. He used to be able to have those matches, but he is not that guy anymore. He is sort of later run Okada, more TV character Okada, where he has consistently good, sometimes great matches, but he's not having the sort of G1 climax banger matches every week like you would expect. And just based on the graphic, this does seem like a great G1 climax sleeper hit from like 2018 or 2019. But it really wasn't that. It was good, but not great. Okada was fun throughout. His heel shtick was really good. And the facials that he was throwing out through the match when getting worked over by Brody were really good. And all of Brody's offense was undoubtedly great throughout the match. But it was just another Brody King match, another one that we're seeing to a little bit of diminishing returns. It wasn't as good as his matches with Darby last year. It wasn't as good as his match with David Finlay earlier this year. And it's just a little bit of a death by comparison because he does a lot of the same stuff over and over in his matches. And while it's fun every single time and doesn't really get that tired, you have to have the correct opponent in there to really bring the best out of him. And I don't think 2025 Okada is that opponent. I give this 3 3/4 out of 5 stars. A fun match, but couldn't really crack into that sphere of greatness. Next, we had the Hurt Syndicate taking on the Outrunners, and here is what there is to like about this match. MVP and the Predator elbow. That's it. It's not bad. It wasn't a bad match. It was just a mid match. The Outrunners are a lot of fun in the ring, but they're also very mid in the ring. Their offense never looks good, and even some stuff in this match, like at one point, one of them was just trying to jump over the ropes after a hot tag and got caught and like completely messed up the timing. Such a glaring, weird little botch. And this is not what the Hurt Syndicate should be doing right now. This is not when they are at the most entertaining, when they are facing mid-card acts and 50-50ing with them over the course of a 10-minute match. Like, if they wanted to have a 10-minute match that's competitive back and forth with FTR, with the Young Bucks, with Kings of the Black Throne, absolutely go for it. But when you're doing it with the Outrunners, it just doesn't really mesh to the image that I have of the Hurt Syndicate. And it's important for the company to maintain that image for as long as possible because it will start to diminish eventually. And I don't feel like they're doing a good enough job maintaining the aura that the Hurt Syndicate has worked to build. So it was fine, but I feel like it did a little bit of damage to the Hurt Syndicate. Not that they won't be able to recover it, because they're incredible and they could have a squash match against some local jobbers on Next Dynamite, and they'll be my favorite act in AEW again. I just feel like this didn't really accomplish anything. It didn't move either teams forward, and it didn't really progress the idea of the Hurt Syndicate being the most dominant heel tag team in all of AEW. So it just didn't really work on any level. I give it 2 out of 5 stars. So to start the card, we have 4.5 stars, 4.5 stars, 4.5 stars, and then we dip a little bit. 3 3/4, still a good match though, but then a 2-star to really bring us down. We need a pick-me-up. We need something to get us going. And we get Toni Storm versus Mariah May. Now, I don't like plunder brawls. I've said that in many, many videos before. I feel like every pay-per-view I say I don't like plunder brawls because on every pay-per-view there is some form of street fight, unsanctioned, hardcore, ladder, tables match, whatever it is, there's always some sort of plunder brawl. And it is oftentimes just excuses for wrestlers to forego normal storytelling beats and take shortcuts in order to create a match, to get the crowd to pop for weapon spots rather than fully invest them in the match with drama and with storytelling and with character. But there is a perfect version of everything, and this was a perfect version of a plunder brawl. Every complaint I just levied, the exact opposite is true of this match. They didn't use weapons to replace normal story beats. They didn't use weapons as a crutch, I guess is what I should say. They used them to inform the story that they have created over the past year plus they have been together as an act. The broken champagne bottles, the shoe, the table that had spray paint on it, even a taser at one point. Like, all great stuff and all weapons that applied to what they were doing. Um, I normally don't like seeing women bleed too much on my screens. Maybe that's just like a weird little thing that I have as a guy where I love women's wrestling and I normally root for women's wrestling to be great more so than I do men's wrestling. But when it gets into this plunders brawl sphere, I don't really vibe with it a lot. But for some reason in this match, it just clicked for me. Seeing Tony and Mariah just gushing blood all down their face, it just got this visceral reaction out of me where they're no longer women's wrestlers. They're no longer competitors. They're just these savage animals going at each other. Just these two people who want to kill each other. And that is a vibe that doesn't exist too often in these plunder brawls. I thought the action and the emotion that this match was able to conjure was better than Swerve Strickland versus Adam Page in the cage last year, better than Kevin and Sammy from Elimination Chamber, better than Cody and Kevin from the Royal Rumble. They were just able to capture this energy that so few matches really are able to hit. It was so visceral, so disgusting at points, but always in a way that just enraptured you in what was happening. I think this was a perfect match. I've never seen a better one-on-one plunder brawl than this. I don't know if I ever will because it was just go from the beginning, no fat, all story. Every single move, every single weapon was used to enhance a characteristic to pull the audience into the match and use everything from the background that they've built to inform everything in this match. It was just perfect. There is no rating this match deserves other than 5 stars. An absolutely perfect match and the highlight of the show, in my opinion. Next, the greatness keeps on rolling because we're watching Kenny Omega take on Konosuke Takeshita. A recipe for success no matter what. But I did have some reservations coming into this match because Kenny has not really been the Kenny of old recently. Obviously, he had the incredible match with Gabe Kidd at the beginning of this year, but subsequent outings on Dynamite and AEW television just haven't really been like the Kenny of old. It just seems like he's a little bit off. And if it were any other wrestler, you would say, yeah, of course he's a little bit off. He had this incredibly dangerous surgery and this incredible recovery, and he was out for like a year and a half. Yeah, he's going to be a little bit rusty. But, you know, unjustly, Kenny Omega doesn't really get that because he is the greatest wrestler on the planet, one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. So people just expect him to be that every single time. And man, he was all the way back in this match. He was so incredible, like the true Kenny Omega of old, and he did such an incredible job in this match about selling his midsection after the diverticulitis, after the surgery where he had that section of his intestines removed. They did such an incredible job in this match about selling that. I don't really remember that being a huge story point in the Gabe Kidd match, but in other matches in AEW, they definitely have hit on that story beat. But I think this is the last match they should do it. I don't think they should really revisit this diverticulitis spot or sequence of a match after this because they nailed it in this match. They hit it perfectly. And a lot of that was due to Kenny and his selling. He really did an incredible job selling and convinced you he was in pain. And maybe, yes, he really was in pain. But regardless of what it was, he did just such a perfect job about convincing the audience that he wasn't going to be able to finish this match. And on the other side, Takeshita just did such a phenomenal job about pushing Kenny to the point where you're nervous about him, you're worried about him, you want him to make a comeback, but not too far that his comeback is unbelievable. I feel like they were able to really nail the tone throughout the match of working over Kenny enough to get the crowd invested in his comeback, but not too much that you lost the crowd and it became unbelievable. And I love the finish to this match. I love when a match ends without someone using their finisher. Kenny didn't win and win the title using the one-winged angel. He used it with a reversal from a pin to another reversal to another pin that got to Takeshita. I thought it was such an awesome, awesome ending. I don't think it was a perfect match. I don't think this quite lived up to the standard that Kenny and Takeshita could have. I don't think it was as good as their previous singles encounter, but it was still a phenomenal, excellent match and continued the incredible momentum set up by Toni Storm versus Mariah May. I gave it 4 3/4 out of 5 stars. Next up, we had a steel cage match. Will Ospreay taking on Kyle Fletcher. I wanted to give this match 5 stars so badly. And for the majority of its runtime, I was convinced this was going to be a 5 star match. But it is not. Let me start by talking about why I wanted it to give it 5 stars, because in a steel cage match, you aren't just ramping up the violence of a normal match because there's mesh all around you and you're throwing people into it. The physicality that you display in the ring with your strikes, with your normal signature moves, has to be ramped up as well. And they did such a phenomenal job at that in this bout. Everything they did was turn up to 11 from their previous encounters. And like their previous encounter at Full Gear last year, which was so predicated on the hate that these two guys had for each other and just the unimaginable lengths they're willing to go through to hurt each other, that was toned up somehow in this match where you believed they hated each other even more than last time and they wanted to hurt each other even more than last time. It was building on something that was perfect, and it was able to find just another little section above it to really explore. I thought the violence in here, the blood, some of the shots with weapons, some of the shots with the cage were just incredible. And they really incorporated a steel cage well. I love the spots of Osprey not fully being accustomed to wrestling in this kind of environment, like him going for a springboard and hitting his heel off the back of the cage, and just sort of him being frazzled a little bit by that. It's those little details which really truly make up great all-timer matches. And another one was when Osprey was in the corner and he had the barbed wire bat and he just had this insane, incensed look on his face, like Mick Foley did back when he was wrestling for ECW or WCW in the 90s. Like all of those things were pushing it to 5 star territory. But it sort of came unraveled a little bit when Mark Davis came out. I feel like maybe this is just me being a crotchety old man, an old fashioned wrestling fan. But if you are having a steel cage match, it has to be a one-on-one encounter. That is the whole backbone of the match, is that this structure is meant to keep these two guys in and everyone else out. And while you can have someone enter the match and not really have it destroy the aura of that bout, all future bouts are significantly hampered by that, because if in the future we're having a match where the resilient babyface is going up against the leader of a faction, like let's say in a month down the line, Swerve Strickland versus John Moxley is in a steel cage, so that Claudio and Pac and Wheeler Yuta and Marina Shafir can't interfere. I'm not going to believe that now, because in this match, I've seen someone just walk out with bolt cutters and interfere in the match. Like the stipulation is invalidated by that entry into the match. And that is, I understand, that is me being persnickety and that is me reading too far into it. But I didn't really like it. And that's not the only criticism I really had. I feel like in this match they went one step too far with the near falls at the end. In previous matches, I feel like they nailed the tone perfectly. Like at Full Gear and at World's End last year, they really nailed those tone perfectly of getting just the right amount of near falls to build to the final fall at the end, the crescendo of the match. But this was just too much. I get the Tiger Driver is the ultimate kill shot, but a brain buster on a steel chair and a Spanish fly off the top of the cage, those should be match ending moves, and they weren't. And that takes my realm of believability too far. It's too unbelievable, especially as like Kyle Fletcher hit Will Ospreay with a brain buster on a chair. And then right after, Ospreay was back up and they were climbing up the cage to do another spot. And then they hit a Spanish fly off the top of the cage. And literally 15, 30 seconds later, Kyle Fletcher was up and yelling at Will Ospreay, I hate you, I hate you. And while that was cool, it didn't make any sense. Like it didn't work within the believability or the framework of the fiction of the universe. And I hate screwdriver spots. And there's a couple in this match. Not I hate them like they're disgusting and they make me feel bad. I hate them because if you stab someone in the side or the forehead with a screwdriver, like they did a lot in this match, you're going to see a mark or you're going to see some blood. And we didn't see that. Like Will Ospreay got stabbed in the side and then he was just fine. There was no bruise there. Kyle Fletcher got stabbed right on the top of the dome. And then afterwards, there was just no mark there. So they just went too far. Everything that was great about the match, they took one step too far in it. And it sucks. It sucks because I was watching a perfect match that just didn't show proper restraint to really nail the finish. And maybe I'm being a little too critical of it. I'm sure if people aren't annoyed by that stuff like I am, like too many false finishes, like overbooking the ending of a match, like having some ridiculous weapon shots that just don't make sense. If people if that's not already in their mind and those are pet peeves in pro wrestling like they are with mine, they probably wouldn't have minded them as much as I did, but it really served to sort of take me out of the end of this match. And not take me out like I was hating it, just take me out that I wasn't as in love with it as I was at the beginning. Because even in the end, the action, the physicality was still off the chains. The sequences looked so beautiful. Every move was so snug. And it just sucks that these little things that are seeming to be more and more prevalent in Will Ospreay matches continued and sort of dipped this match below the 5-star mark for me. I gave it 3, or sorry, I definitely didn't give it 3. I gave it 4 3/4 out of 5 stars. Just a little bit below the mark. It could have easily been a 5-star match. They just went too far over the line in a couple different areas. And now we are on to the main event. It is Jon Moxley versus Adam Copeland and eventually versus Christian Cage. This was bad. And it wasn't a bad match necessarily. There were some bad things about it. It was insanely long. It was like one of the longest matches on the card. It was like 27 or 28 minutes, which is the same length as Ospreay and Fletcher, as well as Omega and Takeshita. And look how much those guys were able to cram in the matches that this just didn't have. It was just a normal match. It was mid. It was really mid. Like if you took all of the action in this 28 minutes and condensed it down into 15 minutes with a lot less selling, a lot less jabbing to the crowd, it would have been much better. But the standard is that the title match has to be the longest match on the card because that gives it the most importance. So they just sort of put them out there for more time than they actually needed. And matches like these where there's not a lot of flashy offense, where they are just sort of they are down to basic wrestling. They are doing heat sequences, they are doing babyface fire ups, they are doing yelling to the crowd, really trying to pull the crowd into it. They thrive off of fan interaction and crowd heat. And this match had absolutely none of it. A lot of times, crowds can be quiet. I love watching Monday Night Raw, and crowds are quiet on Monday Night Raw a lot. And a lot of time it doesn't interfere with my enjoyment of the match. But this was deafening silence. It was just such a cataclysm. I don't think it was because the fans were tired after Osprey versus Fletcher. I think it's because they were so not invested in this storyline. And this is definitely not what AEW needed right now. They were on such a hot streak on this pay-per-view card alone, where outside of Hurt Syndicate versus the Outrunners, everything on this match clicked. Everything was great except for Okada versus Brody King, which was just very, very good. But outside of that, everything was legitimately great on this show. And then you put something out here that is the antithesis to this, the antithesis to what the crowd wants to see. They want to see hot action with characters they care about. And instead, they got boring, extended heat sequences with two characters who they don't care about, who they did care about once, but AEW has sucked the life and the enthusiasm out of those characters over this awful, awful storyline. And it had a whack ass finish too. Christian came in, cashed in his money in the bank contract. Like, I don't know what else to call it. That's what it is. Blatantly should have been disqualified when he hit Copeland over the head with the contract, and then got in and lost to John Moxley within the space of a minute. It was bad for so many reasons. One, because it was blatant that they don't want Moxley to lose the title, but they also don't want Copeland to use. They want to protect Copeland. So they had these two people who they're putting in a match and they want to protect both of them. They don't want either of them to lose. So they throw Christian out there just for someone to take the pinfall. Lack of conviction in their booking that really, really just was bad. You know, you want to see whether it is John Moxley the dominant heel, you make him dominant by letting him beat big stars like Copeland, or you want Copeland to be the triumphant babyface, then you have him beat the main heel of the company like John Moxley. But taking this third route is just such a cowardly way to do it. And also, I don't know what AEW is doing with like this money in the bank contract thing, but if this was the first instance of it, what a terrible start for this stipulation in the future. Christian holds on to it for 6 or 8 months, someone who the crowd never believed in, the company never got behind to be a main event player, then cashes in it in and loses miserably, and loses obviously to just be a story beat in a larger storyline of two other people. This match failed on every single front. And on its own, it wasn't terrible. It was long, it was too boring, but it wasn't terrible. It would be like a 2 to 3 star match somewhere in that line. But the awful finish, the lack of crowd heat, the just being the opposite of what everything else on this card was, ending this incredible card with just such a flat, deflating finale. It just showed that yes, you can get invested in AEW. You can love Will Ospreay, you can love Kenny Omega, love Tony Storm, love Mercedes Moné, Adam Page, MJF, whoever you want to throw the praise on, but you're always going to have this main event program that sucks, and you're always going to hate it, and nothing is going to make it better. That is where we are at right now with AEW, and this show did nothing to change the opinion of that. AEW's been on a super cold streak lately, and I, for a long period of this pay-per-view, was thinking this is where they turn it around. They've had good TV up until now this year. This is the peg where they really start to drive forward what once made AEW great. And then this main event happened, and I went, oh, never mind. That's not going to happen. So it was a vibe killer. It was a boring match, no crowd heat, bad finish, and a vibe killer. I really debated what rating to give this match, and I settled on 1 star because I don't think there is anything in this match to like. even the action when it threatens to be good some of the time gets hindered by no crowd pop and just going into some heat sequence or some rest hold immediately after. Nothing in this match to like, I don't watch every AEW match. I don't watch Collision. I don't watch like pre shows. I don't watch Ring of Honor. This is the worst AEW match I've seen this year. And if I were at the end of the year to do a top 10 worst matches of the year list, this would be on there in some capacity because outside of what you were watching in the ring for the larger ideologies of AEW, for all the criticisms that fans have with this company, this was such a microcosm of why people hate it. And sitting through it was almost depressing. A terrible, terrible way to end the show. 1 star. And I'm sorry to end the video on such a flat note like that, but AEW ended the pay-per-view on such a flat note, so what's a boy to do? Those are my thoughts on the pay-per-view. If you guys like the video, please consider subscribing, leaving a comment, leaving a like down below. And while you're in the comment section, tell me what you thought of the pay-per-view. Do you agree that Tony versus Mariah was the highlight of the show, or could Ospreay and Fletcher or Kenny and Takeshita outshone them a little bit? Was the main event as bad as I am making it out to be? Let me know what you guys thought in the comments down below. I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video. Your support really means the world to me. I have been Isaiah from Hot Tag Wrestling. I would like to thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you next time.